Jaanus Sooväli from here, from Tartu, the Department of Philosophy and Semiotics. And obviously, if you want to do semiotics, Tartu is the best place in the world for its tradition in semiotics. And Jaanus has been researching in the Western conception of decision, and also on the philosophy of Aristotle, Nietzsche, and Derrida. And he's also translated Nietzsche into Estonian, edited Nietzsche's work in Estonian. So we'll look at the Estonian concept of the abyss, Kuristik.
And good afternoon to everybody. Yes, I'm supposed to talk about Estonian Kuristik. So the title of my presentation is Estonian Kuristik, a journey to the north. But I'm not going to talk much about Kuristik actually, but I will talk a little bit about the north as well as perhaps the journey. Here are some Estonian words. So Estonian is a Finno-Ugric language, as you probably all know, and it has like three very peculiar characteristics. So first, we have no grammatical future. We don't distinguish the genders, so our nouns are genderless, and we don't also distinguish genders in personal pronouns, so we have only one personal pronoun, not like in English she or he, or in German er, sie, and so on. So, and thirdly, we have a lot of cases or declinations, right? 14 cases. And as for the future and gender, so there is like saying the foreigners make fun of us that we have no sex and no future. So in any case, so there are some words here. So Kuristik would be like the most direct translation of English abyss, right? But it is not actually a very powerful word in some sense. So it comes from Isaurian, and it basically just means a deep hole, a ravine, also in some cases, like a valley of a river, a deep valley of a river. Now, much more interesting word in Estonian would be this põhi, right? And it means bottom, ground, foundation, so and north. So Grund, like ground, like it would be German Grund obviously, but also then north. So, and then there are some derivatives like põhiline, that is something essential, important, fundamental, põhjus, cause, reason, right? And põhjatus, so this tus ending here is the negation, and so bottomlessness, groundlessness, abyss. So in some sense, but this word põhjatus is not actually used very much. It is used in poetry, obviously, and in literature, but it is not used very much in everyday conversations and language. So Kuristik is used there much more. So these are some words, and now, so we can ask the question, so what could it mean that põhi means both ground, foundation, and north, right? And obviously, so I'm going to talk about põhi quite a lot, and põhi is exactly, or seems to be exactly something that is opposed to the abyss, right? To the groundlessness or bottomlessness, right? So, but what could it mean that põhi means both ground foundation and north. So it could be homonymy, right? There are homonymies in language, obviously. A word or two words that look exactly the same but have completely different meanings, and the meanings are not related to each other, right? Or it could be a polysemy. A word has many meanings, but the meanings are somehow related to each other, or referred to each other, associated with each other. So, which one is it? Not so easy to say, but it seems that when we look at some of the Uralic mythologies and folklore, then it seems that it is a polysemy. So these meanings, bottom, ground, foundation, and north, are somehow related, and they contain some kind of archaic cosmology. So what could this cosmology be? So Hasso Krull, Estonian writer and translator and also folklorist, and he has worked extensively on Finno-Ugric and Uralic folklore. So he believes that that there is indeed a logic behind these different meanings. So it seems that that in the mythology or folklore of some of the Uralic people living close to the Ob River in Siberia, so that those people believe that in the north there is another place, right? Different from our world, right? Where our forefathers went when they died, right? So a kind of underworld, right, where our forefathers live after they have died, and it is an obscure, a dim place where the sun doesn't shine, but at the same time, it's not simply a bad or evil place. So witches or shamans can sometimes visit this place and get helped to cure some illnesses in our world. So there is this communication going on between the worlds. And obviously, as the word already refers to or implies, there is something essential about this realm, right? And it affects our world, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. And just to, in passing, talk about the sun. So as I said, there is no sun, and it is a very essential place in some sense, as the word implies. Then that would be something that distinguishes it from the, let's say, Greek mythology and culture, where the sun is obviously the realm of truth and goodness and eternity and so on. So for those people here, moon was much more important, and also the North Star, for example, right? So, as pointed out, you can potentially get there to this realm of our forefathers. You can potentially get there when you start going to the north, right? However, there is another way of getting there. By going into the ground, into the bottom of the ground or earth. So we have this expression, maapõhjas. So it's like in the bottom of the ground. So it's like somewhere in the ground, right? So there are two ways of getting there. You start going to the north, and eventually you might get to this other realm. But the other possibility is when you fall into a hole let's say, or start, or into an abyss in a way, right? You fall into a hole, and you might end up in this other realm, right? So this is the logic behind these different meanings, right? According to this Estonian folklorist I mentioned. So when one falls into a hole, one doesn't fall into an abyss, right? So abyss in an absolute sense, so into nothingness. One doesn't just keep falling. No, one falls into another realm, to the place where our forefathers live. Now, besides this world, so this world of our forefathers and our world here, it seems that there are also other worlds. Some are above, some are below. So it's like a multitude of worlds, right? And it seems that that there is no real, although this world of our forefathers is something essential, as the word says. However, there is probably no center like among these worlds. Like all these worlds have their functions. There is communication going on. They affect each other in one way or another. But there is like no center, right? So one can't say that one world is like somehow absolutely more important or absolutely like a foundation for all the other worlds, right? Now this is important in some sense because when we talk about abyss, then obviously abyss in a strict sense can be only conceptualized in relation to a certain center or foundation. So you fall away from something, right? You stand somewhere and then you fall into an abyss, right? And you fall and you fall and you fall. So, but if there is no center, right? And if there are these multitude of words and you just fall from one world to the other, right? Then this would not be like a pure experience of the abyss, right? Because there is always this põhi, which is ground, somewhere in the north or beneath or whatever. So we could ask, so as I implied, so despite this overwhelming presence of the ground, obviously in the mythology of and folklore of those people, so can we still find something abyssal in this in this cosmology? And if we do, in what sense? Right. So I've been thinking about for this conference, what would like an experience of the abyss be, or how could I like get hold of it, or how could one like describe it or somehow conceptualize it? And obviously it's not easy because it's abyss, right? But in philosophy, so there is a principle called principle of sufficient reason. So once again, we have this reason here. So principium rationis sufficientis in Latin, Satz vom zureichenden Grunde in German. So once again, we have Grund there, right? Ground, right? So principle of sufficient reason. So what does this principle say? So what does this principle of sufficient reason like say? So basically it says that, and this principle goes back to Plato and Aristotle, but it takes its most explicit form in Leibniz probably. So, and it seems to be a very simple principle, but when you apply it, then it gets more complicated. In any case, so in a very simple form, it says every being and every insight can be led back to a sufficient ground or reason, or even more simpler terms, everything there is has a sufficient reason cause or ground for its being, right? So obviously, and this is one of the main principles of thinking, let's say, and obviously it is somehow like posits this ground, and it is not, I mean, it indeed tries to, in some sense, cover up the abyss, right? Or so. So, thus, a pure experience of the abyss would involve the breaking down of the principle of sufficient reason, obviously, right? The experience of absolute groundlessness. But this principle, I mean, obviously still reigns in the Finno-Ugric and Uralic mythology and folklore. I mean, everything is interpreted in terms of reasons, causes, happenings, events, right, which are caused by some deeds, some thoughts, crimes, and so on. So obviously, this principle reigns in the Finno-Ugric and Uralic mythology, and probably in every mythology, although that can be discussed, right? So, and if that's the case, so can we find in, let's say, mythological interpretations of the world this pure experience of the abyss? So sure we can find, so that's why I'm calling it a pure experience of the abyss. For sure there is something abyssal in every mythology, and Marco explained very well what this abyssal could mean. But what about this, I'm just interested, speculatively, so what would a pure experience of abyss be? Or how could we so it seems that we can't find it in Finno-Ugric mythology, maybe in none of the mythologies, but I'm just interested, like what would it be, a pure experience of the abyss, like pure experience of falling? And has anybody described it, or what would it be? And then, of course, we have some important thinkers like Schopenhauer and Nietzsche, right? So it seems to me that this pure experience of the abyss is like first captured in its most explicit form by Schopenhauer, and then obviously elaborated by Nietzsche in the concept of nihilism. I mean, very, very famous, obviously, concept. So according to Schopenhauer, the innate nature of the world is the eternal, blind, self-contradictory, aimless, purposeless will. So the world of perception is just a manifestation of this blind will. Now, the principle of sufficient reason, which is one of the main principles for Schopenhauer as well, but this principle of sufficient reason applies only to the perceptual world, the world of our everyday lives, right? When we experience tables and trees and people and so on. So this principle of, according to Schopenhauer, this principle of sufficient reason applies only to the perceptual world, right? But the inner nature of the world is this blind will, and there this principle breaks down, right? The will has no motive, the will has no reason, no purpose, right? It's completely groundless. The Schopenhauer's conception of the will is completely groundless, self-contradictory, ever craving something, right? So Schopenhauer, right? 18th century, right? 19th century, at the end of 18th century, beginning of 19th century, that's the time when Schopenhauer wrote his works. So it seems to me that when we talk about this pure experience of the abyss, then, or let's put it that way, it seems that that Schopenhauer introduces or describes something new in the spectrum of human experiences. This kind of nihilism, or this kind of abyss that Schopenhauer describes and Nietzsche then develops further, this is common to modern man, right? I don't think we can find it in any mythological interpretation of the world. I think it's common to a modern man. It's something new because it's radical and it's pure in some sense that there really is no ground. It really is the pure experience of groundlessness. So in the end, let me just have some quotes by Nietzsche. So nihilism is not only the belief that everything deserves to perish, but one actually puts one's shoulder to the plow, one destroys. What does nihilism mean? That the highest values devaluate themselves. The aim is lacking. Why finds no answer. When one has one's wherefore of life, so in German it's warum des Lebens, when one has one's wherefore of life, one gets along with almost every how. Man does not strive after happiness, only the Englishman only does so. Let's leave the Englishman aside. In any case, so I would say that this is first and foremost the experience of the modern man. And we can't find it in mythological worldviews. So, and how does the modern man cope with this experience? It will remain to be seen. I mean, it's not clear at all. And Marco actually pointed out some possibilities, technology and so on, how to fill this void somehow. But it still remains to be seen. Obviously, some thinkers have tried to provide their solutions. There is no time to talk about that today. But yeah, I mean, that remains to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you. Have time for questions, anyone? Yeah. You go first.
Thank you. I have one question and then three very short suggestions. At first, about this põhi as north and bottom, has it been explained also by medieval maps where the Jerusalem has to be up and north obviously is in the bottom?
Say this. So I haven't investigated myself, but I've talked to one of the folklorists, and he claimed that yes, that is so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then perhaps there are some other images in Estonian which could work for abyss. That's the phrase "et maa sind neelaks," let the earth swallow you. Then there is the abyss of fire, tulemöll, and the abyss of water, veekeris.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
From the online audience. Okay. Mm-hmm.
There's some question in Zoom.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
This is a question from Zoom from Yanetta Davies. It sounds as if you have got to go mainly to German philosophers for a discussion of the abyss. Is the idea to be found in Estonian writers, or is the idea strange for Estonians?
I think the idea would have been very strange to the old Estonians. But I mean, Estonian culture has been influenced by German culture a lot, obviously. But our language is very different. That's very true, obviously. So nowadays, it is certainly not strange to Estonians anymore, this idea. I think it would have been very strange to the old Estonians.
Yeah, Jaanus, I was wondering, you were saying, well, there is not really this experience or this dimension in Estonian culture. I was wondering whether maybe the sky could have been seen in that way, as this endlessness, yeah? So you cannot see that in the ground, you cannot see that in these kind of geographical or depth ideas, but the depth of the sky might be a possibility, no? Does that exist?
Thank you. So it could be, but it seems that there were also worlds above. So when you like started flying upwards, then in the end you reach another world, which also had its rules and order and ground and so on. So in that sense, even the sky wasn't like this endlessness or this completely open horizon or something like that.
So it's another sphere.
Yeah. Seems so, yeah.
Here's another question from our online audience. A random thought. Could the Estonian word Kuristik be related to the word kuri for evil?
Yes, very good question. So very, very likely it is not. So so kuri means evil in Estonia, but the linguists don't draw this connection. So they are two different words, it seems.
Maybe one quick question. Another quick question. Yeah.
Yeah, I find this connection between north and ground really interesting, and I mean, from my knowledge, Estonia always strives to be a Nordic country. Is there maybe also a kind of psychological reason to it, because it is fears that otherwise it would be a groundless country?
Thank you. A very nice question. So nowadays, absolutely, we want to be a Nordic country because Nordic countries are rich and we are poor. So obviously, we want to become rich and successful and so on. At that time, so I mean, there was only darkness in the north, darkness, and I mean, but we still wanted to go there towards the darkness.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the
Thank
the
you.
paper. Thanks for the questions and discussion. Yeah.